this. So I piped in the Tunisia data. I'm not going to use year. Values. Okay, my values to, my names to, I'm going to do, oh, let's first select the data we actually want. So we need year, agriculture, industry, services. So that's all we're going to use here. Then we're going to pivot longer. My bad. We're not going to use year. Name is going to go to sector. Great. We're doing it right. And values, I'm going to call it GDP share. I'm going to run this right in here just so I can actually see what it looks like. And it's, I used to value wrong. Names too, names plural. Awesome, that's exactly what I wanted. So I was looking for this data with the years, sector, and the share so that I can create that stacked bar chart. Beautiful. And I got to learn how to use pivot longer. So thank you for helping me with that. And it's just a ggplot. Year, GDP share. I do this every single time where I'll color by sector. And I'll show it to you just so you can see why it's not correct. Because color just does the outline. I've used art for years and I still never do fill the first time. Fill looks a lot prettier, so I'm gonna go with fill. But that's one of my classic art stats mistakes. So that's my plot. I ran it and I know it works. Feel great about that. I can go back to my UI and I can actually now display the plot if I'd like. I have to remember what I called it, which I think is shares plot plural. It is. I'm gonna run the app. If I go to that tab, there we are. I like it. Doesn't have the labels, which again, I'm gonna go steal my own labels. I usually use the labs function when I do ggplot labels, but you can of course use, the separate label functions. I don't even remember what they're called because I never use them. So I'm just going to do growth rate of the GDP. I'm not going to do a label for year, and then growth rate and let people know it's percent. But one thing I said that we would do, the checkbox input group, because I thought with this particular plot, one thing, especially since right now this plot is static, one thing that might be nice is if I did a checkbox input to select only the sectors out of the 3 that I want to actually see. So let's go back to the UI and we'll build another input. We have to go inside the sidebar panel function, comma, and down. And I had said we're going to build checkbox group. So let's go look at an example. See that. Cool. So a checkbox group input is distinct from a checkbox input where you're going to select where you have only one box. I often use the just one box for reasonably something that's going to be true, false. Yes, no. But this, I want to select multiple choices. So let's look at this and go build one. Group input. My input ID, I'm going to call it sectors. My label, so the thing that my user is going to see on the UI, select sectors. Then I have to give choices, and so let's do this in a couple of steps here. So one thing we noticed about this data, these are lowercase, but often on the actual app you want things uppercase. The nice thing is you can do that here in your choices vector. So I can do agriculture equals Lord. Agriculture. Industry. Industry. Services. Okay. Sorry about my short-term memory. Concentrating on a lot of things. Okay. Now I'm going to run it just to, did this work? How pleasant. It did. And I can check. You can see that on default, nothing is selected. Let's leave it that way for now. Similar to how we use the slider input, we need to go back to actually use our input in the server. So we'll go back to our plot. We're actually going to want to do this after we've already pivoted the data. This is where you need to use, we called it sector in input sectors. That's why in was in my brain. I knew it was in there for a reason. So we're filtering the data to just grab the sectors that we've selected. I'm going to run the app again. A constant refrain as I develop Shiny apps. Of course, now when I go to this slide, this tab, excuse me, you can see that the graph is blank because I've selected no sectors by default. I may want to go back and select some by default. So I can go back to the UI. This is where I can do, I think it's just value, no, it's selected here. So selected equals, and I could do just one. I could just do agriculture, or I could do them all. Try just one to start. So now the graph will only show the agriculture sector, but I can turn the other ones on if I want. So up to you on what ones you want selected by default. I think I would probably usually start with all of them selected. At least in this case, I would just start with all of them selected, and then people can deselect them as they desire. So let's go take a look at that. Gorgeous. And I can, if I don't want to see industry, it disappears. You'll notice the axis changes because, of course, with all three, pretty close to 100. But if I get rid of something, you kind of pay attention to that. We're not all the way there to recreating that graph, but we're getting there. Here's a static version. Here's our static bar chart. So I'll take a second, let people catch up. We did a tab layout, we added a checkbox group input, and we started recreating that graph from the data source, showing the economic shares of the GDP in Tunisia. What did I? Ooh, okay, cool. So next I thought we could go in and add a table with the rest of the data. So recall that this data has over here all of these different growth percent, mortality rate percent, unemployment, fertility. You absolutely could make graphs with this. In fact, it might be better to make graphs with these, but for the purposes of demonstration here, I'm going to build a table just to show you guys some cool things you can do with tables. And the code itself is going to be in Tunisia app table _3. So I think the first thing, when I develop, the first thing I like to do is go add a new tab. What do I want to call this? I think the name I gave it in the pre-done code is awful, so use something else. I'm going to do economic indicators percent. I'm going to go look at that. It's empty, of course. There's nothing there. We haven't created anything yet, just like last time. So we've got our spot open. So now let's go into the server and actually build our table. Okay. So Need an output object. Percents plural is a weird word, so I'm not going to do it, even though this might bite me in the butt later. So we've used render plot both of these times. However, now we're going to render a table. So pretty naturally, we're going to use the render table function. So Shiny knows we're going to create a table. We'll use the same data again, but we're only going to select a couple things. We're going to do year. And then I noticed when I was looking at this that all of the ones I want to select have _% in them. So I'm going to do, instead of typing all that out, I'm going to use contains _%, and I'll run this for you so that you can see it grabs for me year, and then population growth, infant mortality, unemployment, inflation, and fertility rate %, because all those variables have that in their name. It's nice when things have common naming like that, so we can use those little dplyr cheats. Makes my life a lot easier, personally. And then that's all I'm really going to do here, because that's my table. I will, of course, need to flip back to the UI and actually display it. So similar to before, we use render table. So the equivalent output function, we'll use table output %table is what I called it. I say confidently. I'm pretty sure I did. So let's run it and have a look at that. Oh, gorgeous.